we're going to go ahead and make our pumpkin pie. We need 1 1/4 cup flour, and we're just going to spoon it into the measuring cup to keep it kind of light and fluffy, and then just scrape it off with a knife instead of doing a packed cup. So we're just going to make sure we've got that. And then we need 3/4 teaspoon salt. And we're just going to go ahead and mix that together a little bit. Speed it up for ya. Now we are using 3 tablespoons of chilled butter and 6 tablespoons of chilled shortening, which I am using the butter flavored Crisco shortening. So this is kind of new. We did one pie with just shortening, we did one pie with just butter, and now we are using a mixture of the two for this crust. And I will say this is probably one of my favorite crusts of the pies that we've made so far. So I recommend this type. So we're just making it until it crumbles down into like little pea-sized crumbles. And then we'll add a 1/4 cup of ice water. Now I wanted to tell you a little bit about the history of pumpkins and pumpkin pie and why we chose this for Illinois. So few foods have a deeper claim to American roots than pumpkins. Oh, we have a surprise visitor. Early American settlers were known to make a pumpkin pie of sorts by hollowing out a pumpkin and filling it with milk and honey and spices, and then just baking it right into the fire. So when I say hollowed out, obviously, just like we would hollow out a pumpkin for making a jack-o'-lantern or something. So all that pumpkin-y goodness would still be in there, just without the seeds and all of that. Now we've got our dough just how we want it, just about. We just going to knead it a little bit, make sure that it's not sticky, that it's going to form well. So you can see it's still leaving a little bit of stickiness to the counter. But we're going to go ahead and just wrap this up in some cling wrap and put it in the fridge for at least an hour just to chill it. Now we've got our dough and it's been chilled. It's got kind of like a clay consistency, really nice. So we're just going to go ahead and roll it out. I'm using this nifty pie thing again that I don't know what it's called, but it does make rolling out a pie very nice. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the history of pumpkin pie. So pumpkins quickly became part of these English natives' lives. England has been making sweet and savory pies for generations, and so they quickly found ways to incorporate pumpkins into that pie making. So what does pumpkin pie have to do with Illinois? Well, I'm going to tell you. First of all, we're taking this crust and we're just going to flip it over onto our pie plate and gently work it down into the pie plate so that it's all even and there's no air bubbles along it. And then I'm going to try to crimp the edges. I am not anywhere near an expert at this, so just be gracious. We're just going to do our best to make a little fancy edge on our pie crust here. So, pumpkin pie, Illinois. In the late 1800s, actually, two brothers, the Libby brothers, and an associate by the name of McNeil, opened a meat canning company in Illinois, near Chicago. And in 1929, they actually introduced a line of canned pumpkins, and it just exploded. So nowadays, it's in Morton, Illinois, and the company is still there. This town is now referred to as the pumpkin capital of the world. About 85% of the consumed pumpkin in the United States comes from Illinois. So now you know. And now you can see my beautiful crimped edges. They are what they are. It is what it is. And Matt was definitely making fun of me, but I did my best. We're going to go ahead and do an egg wash before we pre-bake our pie crust. You do not have to do this. There are two main purposes for an egg wash. One is just for visual appearance. It just helps it to brown nicely and to look really yummy. It can also work as a glue to help pastry stick together, or even the filling to stick to the pastry. So, like I said, it's not completely necessary, but for this, we're going to do it. We're only doing the edges where we're not going to have the filling, just so that bakes really nicely to give the edges of the crust that really nice golden brown color. Then we're going to go ahead and bake this at about 375 for just about 10 minutes before we put the filling in it. We're ready for our pumpkin pie filling. Just a reminder, you can find the full written out recipe on our blog post at ourworldtable.com. It will be under Illinois. So we're using 15 ounces of pumpkin puree. Whoops. And we're just going to crack in 3 eggs. And then we're adding 1 1/4 cup of brown sugar. Make sure that that's well packed. And give that a good stir. Mix those eggs in. Yummy! We just want to make sure that that is mixed together well before we mix in these next ingredients. We have quite a few. So starting off, we have a tablespoon of cornstarch. This is a little bit thicker, so it takes a little bit to get it out of there. We need a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Next, we have 1 1/2 teaspoons of ground cinnamon, 1/8 of a teaspoon of ground cloves, and we have a few to go. All right, this is 1/2 teaspoon ground ginger. It smells really good. And then we need a 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg. I wanted to show you I use a whole nutmeg in this little tiny grater. It's so cute. And that just gives you some nice freshly grated nutmeg. You can get it just as ground nutmeg as well. We also need 1/8 teaspoon of black pepper, and then our cup of heavy cream. You'll need something to scrape that all out. And then a 1/4 cup of milk. Now, all of these spices is what really gives this pumpkin pie a nice, rich flavor, rather than just using pumpkin pie spice, which you can do, but all of these fresh spices are really nice. So we're just mixing that with a whisk. This takes a while, so If you have someone else helping you and you can take turns whisking, that's probably a good idea. Just go back and forth. Otherwise, just use both hands, different techniques. It takes a long time because you're just really trying to get this to thicken up and be ready. Doesn't need to be too thick. It is going to thicken in the oven, so just do the best that you can. For one, I'm very glad that we no longer have to roast and strain our own pumpkin for making pumpkin pie. So here's our pie crust. It puffed up a bit in the center, but that's okay. The filling is going to press down on that, so it won't be an issue. But the edges are nice and browned. Obviously, they're going to get more browned when the pie's in there for the full amount of time, so we wouldn't want it to burn or anything like that. We have quite a bit of filling here, so we have some left over. We don't want to overfill the pie, so we're going to leave it at that, and we're going to put it in the oven for about an hour. I would check it after about 50 minutes. You're going to see in a second what it should look like. I did put a pie crust shield so the edges wouldn't burn. If you have one of those, I recommend it at least for the last half of the baking time. And you can see it's kind of puffs up and just looks really, really nice when it's done cooking.